All right, let's dive right into this explainer. We're talking about a guy who completely redefined his sport, and he didn't do it with brute force, but with absolute elegance and sheer intelligence, the legendary Bobby Moore. Now, when you picture mid-20th century football, you probably imagine heavy leather balls, muddy pitches, and some seriously crunching physical play, right? But right in the middle of all that chaos, Bobby Moore emerged as this figure of pure poise. So today, we're going to explore how a kid from London's East End transformed the whole art of defending and became an absolute, immortal icon of the global game.
Sir Alf Ramsey, England's legendary manager, really hit the nail on the head when he called Moore his captain, his leader, and his right-hand man. He essentially established why Moore is universally revered as the heartbeat of that historic 1966 World Cup team. Now, Ramsey was a notoriously demanding manager, but he famously said Moore was a cool, calculating footballer he could trust with his very life. It's one thing to just be a great player, right? But it's an entirely different level to be the absolute tactical and emotional anchor for a manager carrying the hopes of a whole nation.
Section 1. The Ultimate Football Gentleman. Picture the 1960s. It was a famously gritty era. Players mostly made their names through intimidation and just raw, aggressive physicality. But Moore? He carved out a completely different path. He was widely admired for his gentlemanly conduct. He proved, for sure, that you could be this commanding, authoritative presence on the pitch while always maintaining total honesty and respect for your opponents. His absolute greatest weapon was his mind. It was so sharp that legendary Scottish manager Jock Stein actually joked there should be a law against him because he knew what was happening 20 minutes before everyone else. Moore wasn't the quickest defender out there, and he wasn't the most naturally athletic or physically imposing guy either. But his brain? It operated on a totally different wavelength. He had this crazy capacity to read the game, processing the geometry of the pitch and exactly what the attackers wanted to do long before the ball was even played.
So, just to contrast that, traditional defenders of his era relied heavily on raw physicality, aggressive challenges, and reactive tackles. But Moore completely revolutionized the center-back role. For him, defending was practically a science. It was all about anticipation, perfect timing, and intercepting the ball cleanly. Instead of just diving into the mud to win a challenge, he just casually stepped into the exact space the attacker wanted to use, taking the ball away with this pristine elegance that completely frustrated forwards and absolutely mesmerized the fans.
Section 2. Captaining the 1966 Glory.
The 1960s were a massive, transformative decade for English football, and right at the absolute center of it all was Bobby Moore, wearing that captain's armband. Taking on the national team captaincy is a heavy burden for literally anyone, but he wore it with an effortless grace that united the squad and captured the public's imagination. And get this, at just 22 years old, with only 12 caps to his name, Moore became the youngest ever England captain. That is a staggering testament to his natural authority. I mean, think about that for a second. Being handed the leadership of a major national team at 22, that speaks volumes about the sheer maturity and respect he commanded in the dressing room. He was already mentoring guys older than him just through his quiet, ironclad professionalism and flawless reading of the game.
His rise to glory was just incredibly rapid. He makes his debut for West Ham United in 1958 at just 17. By 1962, he's debuting for the England national team. By 1963, he's captain. And it all culminates in that immortal 1966 final at Wembley against West Germany. And hey, it wasn't just his defending that day. Remember, it was Moore's quick-thinking, pinpoint free kick from his own half that perfectly assisted Geoff Hurst for the equalizer, which ultimately secured England's 4-2 victory and footballing immortality.
And the numbers really back up the legend. He showed incredible loyalty to West Ham, racking up 544 league appearances over 16 years. His national record of 108 caps was just mind-boggling for an outfield player at the time. Especially when you realize this was an era before substitutions, meaning Moore played the absolute entirety of nearly every single match. That record stood for decades before modern players finally broke it, which just highlights his insane fitness levels and how utterly indispensable he was.
Section 3. The Masterclass, 1970 World Cup.
Fast forward 4 years to the blistering heat of Guadalajara, Mexico in 1970. England is facing a seemingly unstoppable Brazilian squad featuring absolute legends like Pelé, Rivellino, and Jairzinho. The temperature was in the high 80s, the humidity was stifling, and while some players were visibly wilting under that Mexican sun, Bobby Moore delivered what a lot of football historians argue is the single finest defensive performance ever captured on film. He was literally a one-man wall stemming the tide of the greatest attacking force on Earth. It was in this specific match against the Brazilian winger Jairzinho, who, by the way, would go on to score in every single game of that tournament, that Moore executed what many consider the most perfect defensive maneuver in the history of the sport. Jairzinho came flying down the right-hand side with terrifying speed. In the situation where almost any other defender in the world would have panicked or lunged in recklessly, Moore displayed a level of tactical genius that academies still teach today.
Let's actually break down the mechanics of this famous interception. Step 1. Instead of diving in, Moore simply held off. He backed up to control the attacker's speed. Step 2. He turned his body almost sideways, refusing to commit his weight prematurely. Step 3. Keeping his eyes completely fixed on the ball rather than the player, he waited for the exact fraction of a second and executed a pristine, bloodless tackle. He took the ball so cleanly that Jairzinho was left completely bewildered, probably wondering where it had even gone.
The mutual respect born in that Guadalajara heat was completely cemented when Pelé, the greatest player of his generation, and Bobby Moore swapped shirts at the final whistle. Pelé calling him the fairest defender he ever played against is just incredibly powerful. That visual moment of two titans of the game, chest to chest, showing absolute reverence for one another, it instantly became a legendary photograph. It was the ultimate validation of Moore's world-class skill and his gentlemanly ethos, recognized by the very best to ever play the game.
Section 4. An enduring football legacy.
You can absolutely see his DNA living on in the modern game. Icons of defensive mastery like Italy's Franco Baresi and Paolo Maldini, English stalwarts like John Terry and Rio Ferdinand, right up to today's Virgil van Dijk. They all directly cite Moore's elegant, brain-over-brawn methodology as their ultimate inspiration. They study his positioning, his calmness under pressure, and his amazing ability to initiate counterattacks directly from defensive interceptions.
Tragically, we lost Bobby Moore way too soon when he passed away from bowel cancer in 1993 at just 51 years old. But the mark he left on the game and on the nation has only grown stronger in the decades since. He wasn't just a player of his time, he was a true pioneer whose philosophy permanently altered the DNA of football. In 2008, recognizing his unparalleled contribution, West Ham United officially retired his famous number 6 shirt. It was a really profound gesture, ensuring that his legacy as their finest legend remains permanently untouched. Whether it's the retired shirt, the naming of a stand at the London Stadium, or the millions raised for cancer research in his name through the Bobby Moore Fund, his presence is still felt every single day in the footballing world.
If you ever visit the new Wembley Stadium, you'll see a towering bronze statue of him looking out over the crowds. The poetic inscription resting at the base perfectly summarizes a man who elevated defending to an absolute art form. It calls him an immaculate footballer, an imperial defender, an immortal hero of 1966, and a gentleman of all time. It's a beautiful tribute that captures not just the incredible player he was, but the man he was, someone whose integrity and grace under fire made him a true national treasure. So I'm going to leave you with this to think about. With modern football relying so heavily on raw speed and sheer physical power, how do today's top defenders truly measure up to Bobby Moore's standard of pure intelligence and gentlemanly grace? As the game continues to evolve into a showcase of sheer athleticism, high-speed pressing, and tactical data, will we ever again see a master of anticipation, quite like the gentleman's leader? When you watch the best defenders in the world this weekend, ask yourself, are they just reacting to the game, or, like Bobby Moore, are they seeing it 20 minutes before everyone else? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep asking those great questions.